Thank you. I'm going to start off with citizen concerns, round one. Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3, approval of the minutes of July 16th, 2019 meeting. Item 4, approval of claims. Item 5, from Board Administration, approval of resolution naming depositories for the Conservation Department. Item 6, from Human Resources, memorandum of personnel transactions. And that ends the consent agenda. I'll move it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. And Rocky, you're the second one down here.
Okay. On one that didn't get my name spelled right anyway.
Oh, well, that is.
Now we're worried about where it goes.
Jeremy just didn't want you to sign in his spot again.
No.
By the way, somebody took out my batteries. I have my suspicions.
All right, moving on to the item 7, County Auditor, approve purchase order to get wireless modems for new election equipment.
Okay, what you have before you, in talking with Dennis, we've, for the equipment that we put forth, that we purchased last year, there was a certain amount left over that we were going to try to do electronic poll books with this year. We put that off because of some issues that were with the Secretary of State's office and the poll book that I wanted to be able to consider. Those are moving forward, so I think that we will take a look at doing those next year and have them ready for the 2020 primary and general election. But what you have before you are wireless modems, and the reason that they became something that we need to consider is that because of the change with the city and the school elections being combined, is that we are now going to do election night reporting where we had to send those results to Secretary of State's office. In order to do that, we typically what we did for school and city elections is that we didn't bring those results into the next day. We just called them in. But now, if we have to do it for this election too, along with the primary and the general next year, we would have to having people actually pick up those cards and bring them physically to the courthouse in order to upload those to the Secretary of State's website. So this has been something we considered when we bought the equipment. I didn't do it at that time because we did it the old-fashioned way. We would call those results in. But those results aren't always accurate, as was occurred in the 2018 election in the Supervisors race, which you folks are well aware of, that there was an error on the election night reporting. This will eliminate that. It will also eliminate the need for people to go down and pick up those cards and bring them back physically, and it also will eliminate having to call people in to answer the phones when they phone in those election night results. Didn't do it typically because I thought that was an expense. It's a good expense to do that, but I think the timing is right now in order to move to that technology.
So Pat, for those that are maybe like afraid of the thought of, not having it called in and everything, your department will still count every ballot after the fact on the election day?
Absolutely. These are for unofficial election night results. That's why we didn't see the need for expending that kind of money for it. But I think the time now, the technology there, and actually, just like everything else, that price has gone down, but it's still an amount. But it's not in my budget. That's why it's in front of you, because we bring it out of the capital improvement program. And so what we're seeking is the authority to go ahead and make this purchase.
And then another point to be made is there probably will be some savings then, because you're not going to have all the poll workers staying around an extra half hour going through all that and calling it in and doing that.
We anticipate that there will be some efficiencies, but it's still, there's an expense involved.
Sure. I'll move item 7.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Young. Any other discussion? Or?
Funding source.
Where are we going to get the funding?
It'll be our fiscal year 20 loan, what we do in May. That's why our CIP is always kind of a floating, moving target till we get to May. So this will be one option here. We do have the sheriff's radios that we're paying off CIP, which was approved by the board, so we'll just add this on when we start making our list up.
So this was not already in the CIP?
It was included in that election equipment. There was a balance there. I forget what it was.
Yeah, just ask Kitty there. I think we've come up with a lot of it being spent, but this is a need, so if it is spent, we'll take it out of our 20 CIP.
Are we over the budget on that, or where are we at?
I think we're pretty close to it.
Okay.
I think we budgeted, what, $500,000 or something 2 years ago.
Yeah, and there was, but we only spent 360 or something like that.
So we're still well within budget.
Well, we bought some other items too, after the machines, and we buy some holes or holding books or something. I thought we bought some other items. It wasn't a very extensive. But then there should be money left over.
I thought there was new stations, a couple new stations, weren't there?
Yeah, but I don't remember what it was, but it was nowhere near the amount that was left.
Either way, it comes out of our CIP.
Right.
We'll check tonight to see what we got left this year, or over the period of 2 years.
Either way, it's something I remember discussing.
Sorry. Yeah, there was an additional expense of voting booths.
Any other questions? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Moving on to item 8 from Human Resources, authorize going forward with changing life and long-term disability carriers.
Hey, Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director. I'm happy to bring this agenda item forward today. I'm asking for authorization to move forward in changing our life insurance provider as well as our long-term disability. There will be a few changes to the plan. The elimination period will increase. Also, the max amount of long-term disability benefit will increase, but then we will also now provide or offer short-term disability to our employees, which I'm happy to say. This will be a few stages before it's all finally in place on January 1st. Any questions? On a considerable savings over 3 years, depending on enrollment, obviously, about $150,000.
Good work. I'll second Taylor's motion.
Motion by Taylor, second by Young. Any other questions here moving forward? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 9A from Building Services, authorize county attorney to draft and authorize board chair to execute contract agreement for office space with Boost.
Kenny Schmitz, Building Services Director. The Boost Department at Trosper Hoyt has requested more space, one additional office. They had a contract that expired in 2018. In trying to determine if they should be, I guess, granted additional office space, one of the items we looked at is how it would impact, I guess, all of the other buildings and tenants, if you will, at the Trosper Hoyt. We have things like DHS as one of the groups over there who pays a certain portion of building expenses and so forth. We just think it's fair to set policy that shows that we have an agreement, an active agreement in place with someone, hopefully try to identify the amount of space that they're occupying in a building. And we understand that, some of these entities have minimal funds to operate with, so we try to take that into concern also. But we believe that a new contract should be done with the Boost program, and we should at least try to identify some costs that they could help pay for as far as building operations go. So I'm requesting that we sign a new contract with Boost for 1.89% of the Trosper building total at approximately $265 per month to cover some of those expenses that we have in that building. We have spoken with Matt Oman as part of the Boost group. He agrees that a contract would be all right. He offered up contract specifics of October 1st, 2019 through September 1st of 2022, which would be 3 years.
So what's the out if we needed that space, like something happened, we needed to have it?
I think we could write contract language to that effect.
I mean, not like that day, but
Right.
within a few months, obviously.
I didn't go into contract specifics with him on that, and I think that would probably be a concern that should be covered.
Well, that's part to bring up, I guess, to authorize the county attorney to draft. So would that be fair to ask the county attorney?
Yeah, I can work with Kenny, and I think I was involved with the prior contract as well. One thing we might want to look at is the term, because if we do 3 years or more, then we've got to go through a public hearing process. Shorter than that, you can avoid doing the public hearing, but it's just another step you have to do.
So like 30 months or
Maybe we,
something?
right.
Right.
Sure.
Or
Jeremy,
maybe make it end on a fiscal year or something, I don't know.
you look like you had a comment.
Yeah,
Question?
and I talked to Matt about this, and it was October 1st is when their next round of funding kicks in, so I said I thought that we'd be amenable to starting utility billing there. And the only other reason, we're having 6 individuals come from Silouxland Mental Health into the Triview building, and so the region is billing them for utilities. So in a sense of fairness and consistency, they were fine with it.
I'll move this.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Young. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Item B and 9B, approved Trosper Hoyt Juvenile Detention Kitchen Project, form of contracts, plans, and specifications for bid purposes.
Quite a while back, the board approved to seek bids for the Trosper Hoyt Kitchen Project. The juvenile detention kitchen currently and for quite some time has not met compliance, and the directors here can probably speak to that if needed, but we'd like to go ahead and get the plans and specifications in the form of contract approved for this and set a hearing date.
I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any other questions on it? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0.
I'd move to set the public hearing date for August 13th, 2019 at 4:45 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Young. This is item C on our agenda. Any questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item D, Law Enforcement Center. LEC Expansion Committee and Citizens Advisory Group recommendations.
As you know, the county has been working for several years, actually probably 4 to 4.5 years.
Kenny, can I interrupt you here? Anybody that's on the Law Enforcement Expansion Committee or Citizens Advisory Group here in the audience, can you go raise your hand real quick? Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Trying to determine what the best outcome would be for our law enforcement and sheriff's offices. The building currently has many issues that are very costly. We actually started this back in 2015. The board did an RFP for architects. CMBA Architects partnered with Goldberg Group Architects and were chosen to represent the county. Since that time, an LHC expansion committee has reviewed and studied aspects of the LEC and looked at costs of doing repairs and upgrades to the facility and how would we address those. We have also a population or overpopulation problem, if you want to call it that, with inmates. It's not the best scenario. Unfortunately, some hard decisions have to be made on really what inmates should be allowed to be discharged or discharged early to accommodate the needs to get others into the facility. Karen, if you can bring up our PowerPoint. So the LEC was constructed in 1985 and 1986. Inmate housing at design was 90 beds. Since that time, it has been expanded twice, once in 1999 and once in 2006 by double bunking the cells. So that brought us to 234 beds. 234 is our current population. Daily operations, detention housing capacity, systems capacity for the building, all exceeding our capabilities currently, whether it be inmate overcrowding, HVAC systems, and on and on. Repair costs are rapidly escalating and coming at us probably quicker than we can address in large amounts. Last year, I believe we replaced 2 compressors, AC compressors at $25,000 apiece. And it's just items like that. We have staggering CIP projections. That's one of the things that was studied. So in 2016 to 2018, these are our CIP actuals for that building. $891,766. Now, some might say, wow, that was wasted money. The fact is, those were projects that we needed to do for one reason or another. The facility, at one point, one of the projects was the front steps on the building were deteriorated to a point where someone was about ready to fall through the front doors. Those are items we had to address. $890,000 worth. Another project that's been ongoing with the DNR is the benzene remediation project. The facility was built on an old gas station site. As of February 2019, $862,379 were expensed. That figure has nothing to do with the previous figure you saw. So totally separate costs, however, very high. Benzene remediation continues. We don't know what the end result is on that. We're still doing testing with the DNR to hopefully some point come to an end to that. But that's ongoing. Dennis, do you have a question?
Something that should be pointed out on benzene remediation. There is a $1 million cap. We are at 8/62 in February 2019, and that cap is reached. It is our expense. That's going to be ongoing.
Thank you, Dennis. So as part of our studies, we studied what it would cost to replace the HVAC systems, which are now 25 to 30 years old, which have a life expectancy of approximately 25 years. So we did some studies. Replacing those systems with like-size replacements. Now, this doesn't include expanding the size of the units, which we would need to do if we replace them because they're insufficient at their current size. But if we did a like-size replacement, our costs are looking at $5.8 million. Now, $2.7 million of that 5.8 is inmate and court relocation costs and transportation costs. In other words, we're talking about if we upgrade these HVAC systems, we have to find somewhere for the occupants to go at some of the periods in these projects. We also did some fast-track cost estimates. In other words, we thought, okay, if we've got to transport inmates or move them off-site to get these projects done, how about if we did a construction project where we work 24 hours around the clock from start to finish? So we projected those costs to see if they would alleviate some of our problems. As it turned out, really it didn't help much. The cost is $5.266 million.
Can you just, for the good of the public or those who may otherwise be watching, how long a project would this take where you would have to otherwise transport, just so the public understands, prisoners all over the state potentially? How long are we looking at to replace their handling systems?
We're probably looking at a 3-month process.
Cost comes back to the county, our responsibility for.
Absolutely, and a more difficulty would be where do you put 234 inmates while you're doing this? Who can take them? There aren't going to be probably a handful of people that could take more than 10. Maybe most of them can't take any, so really what do you do with them? So these are, the county asked me a while back and has been asking for several years to do a CIP projection for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years for the county on their building costs. So this is a CIP projection that was completed last year for the LEC. Estimated cost CIP for the next 20 years, $22.7 million. That is the projected cost for our current LEC.
Half of that in the next 3 years is probably important to notice, too.
Yes. Thank you, Keith. So that brings us to kind of a summation of our costs. This is the Law Enforcement Center. Replace HVAC systems with like-size replacements. This includes boilers and the chillers, $5.8 million. Upgrade the HVAC systems. Upgrade the medical area and classification areas into the buildings so we can come into compliance and meet state recommendations. $22.69 million. Now this figure is not to be $22.7 million is the figure that I gave you earlier. They are two different figures. So this would just be to replace the HVAC and upgrade portions of the facility to bring it into compliance.
And that does not address the overpopulation.
That does not address the overpopulation at all. The next item is expansion, which would address the overpopulation. We could expand the facility to 55 additional beds, replace the HVAC systems, upgrade the medical classification and booking areas, and the cost would be $40+ million. So as we were arriving at this and studying all of this, and again, we've done this over a 4-year period, we've done some extensive studies. When I did my CIP projections, especially the 20-year one, and I came up with $22.7 million, one of the questions had to come up with is if we're going to spend half the cost of a new facility on upgrading our current facility, we better be taking a look at a longer view and a harder view on what is best for the county taxpayer. And we did that. And so we asked Goldberg Group Architects to assist us in doing some projections, which Larry Goldberg has done. His projection on a 400 to 500 bed new facility would be $49.5 million, with $500,000 projected for land purchase if land was needed to be purchased. So those are really the general costs boiled down to what the board needs to base their decisions on. The LEC Expansion Committee and Citizens Advisory Group did make a recommendation, which is in your executive summary. And I'll read it quickly, if you don't mind. The LEC Committee and Citizens Advisory Group recommend a new LEC 400 to 500 bed facility with the potential for 2 future expansion pods, 24 beds each, and courtrooms estimated at approximately $50 million, given our following concerns. 1, a current facility designed for 90 inmates in 1987 with a current capacity of 234, whose HVAC needs at minimum cross a threshold of $5.8 million and will have waste in terms of transportation costs for prisoners when replacements necessitate an unoccupied jail for approximately 3 months' time. 2, public safety and quality of life concerns, given hard decisions of our legal system with the jail operating at often full capacity. And 3, the favorability of a 20-year note with building capacity for revenue from federal prisoners, ICE, and other counties, which has the potential to pay for itself while mitigating inevitable costs that will come with the looming emergency issue. So I stand before you today asking the board to look at all the information that has been done over the past 4 years and hopefully think positively and consider a work package that Larry Goldberg with Goldberg Group Architects has provided us to look at. I'd like to answer any of your questions or any of the public's questions, and then invite Larry up to do the same.
Before we move on there, is there anybody out here today that came because they're opposed to the idea of a new facility? Just anyone that could be recognized as that? Okay.
Can you just explain, and you did an excellent job with the overview, which is a pretty large issue. Can you explain the part of revenue that would be offsetting to taxpayers and how, generally speaking, that would work as far as projections on what would be needed for overage or slippage or the current capacity that's not being met, and how that would work, just generally speaking?
Yes, we're hoping that, and Larry Goldberg has also been assisting with this. We know we're currently overpopulated. We're hoping, or we're not hoping, we know that a new facility would run more efficient. Cost estimates from resource consulting engineers have told me that savings projections on energy usage would be as much as 30% on electricity and gas, 10 to 20% on water, sewer. So although a new facility would be bigger, we know that there would be substantial savings overall. We did try to project some of those costs. I believe some of the figures over a 20-year period were over $1 million on energy usage on a like-size facility. Of course, we know usage would be larger in a new facility, but it would be much more efficient. One of the other items we spoke about was revenue. There's a possibility if we built a new facility with expansion or room to expand, and possibly a little bit larger than what we our current capacity would be, but there's a possibility that we could get other counties or other entities, possibly ICE, or federal employees or federal inmates that would, or the U.S. Marshals, that would offset the revenue of that facility and help pay for it. Does that answer your question, Jeremy?
Yes, I think that's helpful.
And then something to note, in a new facility, correct, we would have a transportation division because of the efficiencies of a newer building.
That's correct.
And with transportation, when we have federal inmates, we would be reimbursed more for the cost, correct?
That is correct, yes. Also, there's, again, a new facility would be a larger facility. However, if it were the same size, we know that Goldberg Group Architects has told us that it could be operated, or our new facility, the same size, could be operated with less staff because it would be designed much more efficiently. And so, although a new facility probably, may or may not require more people, we do know that it would be much more efficient with the proper layout and proper camera usage and items like that. So, a better usage of staff.
The key to me is that these are obviously huge costs, and there's only one option up there that allows us to offset some of that cost with the income gained from federal prisoners or just other prisoners. The reason for that is this is not a common problem. I shared with the board earlier, I met a supervisor at ISAC that has a jail overcrowding issue in his county with the jail made for less than a dozen people. That's doubled in capacity. So this is something where there's going to be a first mover in our region, and in areas where that's happened, the other counties have a place to send their excess. But if we are not that first mover, then we are going to be faced with the transportation costs and the extra costs that will be incurred without any of the, as you mentioned, energy savings, better location, or anything like that.
That's a very good point. You are correct. There will be someone somewhere that will be the first to step up, and others will try to utilize their facility. Another good point to make is, we've studied this for 4 to 4.5 years, diligently studied it. In that amount of time, construction and other costs have continued to skyrocket. Last year alone, I believe it was 7.5%. The construction costs went up.
Just materials.
On just materials, yes. Not including labor, and there are some labor shortage problems as well. But the longer that counties continue to put their problems aside, the higher the costs are. Unfortunately, yes, we're looking at some huge costs. All of our costs exceed our $1.2 million bonding threshold. So if the supervisors here decided, hey, we're just going to replace the HVAC systems and call it good, guess what? You're still going out for a public bond vote. There's no way around it. Sitting on our hands isn't going to make it go away or make it any better. We're just going to end up with, in my opinion, an emergency situation at some point that we're going to have a difficult time in handling. So,
I think that's a key point. If we sit on our hands and you could come up with a scenario where it's minus 10 degrees and these air handlers that are original, that are 32 years old and have a 25-year shelf life fail, there's no way around having to find places for everyone in the next 24 hours, and that's a nightmare scenario.
And it's a good point, and that's also something, the LEC Expansion Committee talked about, and Jeremy, as my liaison, brought up one day. He said, well, what happens if you get a call, in the middle of the night and says our HVAC system's down, and now we know we've got to do something and we're in trouble. What are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, because that's a huge problem if it's an HVAC repair that I can't address. I'm talking about if an air handler goes out and it can't be repaired, we're looking at a 6-week lead time just to order equipment. That's not design equipment. That's just me saying, okay, I want to order exactly the same size as we've got, go. And the answer back will be, okay, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks. So my answer back is, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so what I'm going to do is present everything I've been working on for the past 4.5 years to the board, and hopefully we can decide what we're going to do together.
234 space heaters.
In agreement with some of the other board members here, I agree that's a substantial amount of money, but at the same time, I'm one of those inclined to think that the building that's over there now the quality isn't there, and I struggle to put that much money into a building where the quality isn't built in initially, and more often than not, it seems like we got to spend money to save money. So I'm not much in favor of putting that kind of money in that building. I know buildings aren't built the way they were. Witness the courthouse here the way they were 100 years ago, but we still need some efficiencies and some expansion, and I just don't see the room for it over there with all the testing that's been done and talking about expanding to a 3rd floor, and obviously we can't do that without a ridiculous amount of money, and still would need the HVAC and other systems replaced. So,
Right.
Rocky brings up a good point with the expansion. Can you just hit upon how are you going to assure taxpayers and the public that in 10, 15 years, now you're not bumped up against that same threshold and you're looking at, can you talk a little bit about the possibility of expansion for a new facility and how that would have a follow-on potential if need be?
Yes, I mean, if we built a new facility, if built correctly, we could do some pre-design and some pre-construction work that would allow us to do what we call pod expansions to the facility. You could drop in any number of additional pods with cells in them. Again, you could pre-engineer or pre-construct the footing materials that would accommodate those, and so you could address the population in the future as needed, which is a huge problem with the current facility design.
Well, I think that's, one of the biggest things about that price tag for just renovating the old jail is you're going to spend $22 million and you really gain next to no capacity, no ability to generate revenue through federal contracts, and it just doesn't seem like it would make any sense to stick that kind of money into an old building like that and not have anything better than what you started with.
Right.
Come on up there.
Well, I just wanted to.
You got to come up to the microphone there. We know who you are, but it's for the record.
Lawrence Goldberg, Goldberg Group Architects. When we got done with the renovation and then said to Kenny, we're going to try and find a way to expand this existing facility, come heck or high water. The only way we actually could do it was move the sheriff's department out of the building, move the courts to where the sheriff's department was, renovate the whole back half of the ground floor so we could finally put in booking, intake, special needs, padded cells, a vehicle sally port, and all the things that your current facility can't have otherwise. If you remember, we tried 2.5 years ago to take the sally port on the side that the Pioneer Bank's on and try and shoehorn some beds in there to create some kind of step-down intake unit. And it just wasn't worth it. It was too much money, it was too much staff for what, and that's pretty well. But when you look at the classifications, when you look at the locks, all of that we had on our schedule to be added, torn out, and replaced. So the problem was, if I'm taking 2 pods and ripping the locks and the door frames out and putting in new 2-piece security door frames and locks, then do I do that at the same time he's doing the HVAC unit replacement? Because why in the world would you want to take a group of detainees and move them out of the jail twice? You see what I'm saying? So that's when we realized that we had reached the end of this journey and that renovation probably wasn't the best avenue moving forward.
Thank you, Larry.
But one thing I would mention, Kenny, having somebody that was here when we built that thing, when they wouldn't do the joint city-county facility, and the design was so that it could always be added on up. And then they save money by not going deep enough, so they can't do that. So whatever we do, we better darn sure we plan it right.
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, I do think we should move forward with this process. But one of the major factors of whether or not it's going to be successful at the next step of a bond issue vote, again, which will be required for normal repairs or a new jail, is that joint aspect. We've discussed that as a board a bit in the past, as far as you know, potential involvement from other cities. So that is absolutely critical to ensure that we don't waste the taxpayers' money to conduct a study, conduct plans, and, you know, knowing that we're in an environment where this is a tough sell to the public. We see the numbers. Everyone in this room is up to speed, but this is still a major undertaking for the public. And so I guess my question to Chairman Raddick, have you had any further updates from the city of Sioux City, or is there anything that we can look forward to there? And if you want to address it later, that's fine.
I think there might be more promise, maybe looking down the road with Sergeant Bluff on maybe some opportunities for them.
I spoke with Sergeant Bluff earlier today. And again, City of Sioux City is open to talking about a joint venture, but they would need to know what details of that would look like, you know, before agreeing to anything, obviously. I did speak to Sergeant Bluff earlier today. They as well are open-minded. They have been toying with the idea of the need of a new police station / fire station for some time for their city. They're also open-minded and interested to know what joint opportunities might look like. So there's been some conversations, however light, back and forth, but there is some interest there.
Is there a way, this is 20 pages worth of study, and this has been something that commend our business leaders, chamber folks, current sheriff and his office, judges, clerks. So we've had this committee. All of this material should be available to the public so that they can see all the study that's gone into it. So I hope people have the assurance that this isn't something we've come up with quickly, and there's been a lot of study behind this.
Yes, I think there was, Karen may know, but I think there was something like 260 pages in your backup material today. Was it something like that, Karen? So, yeah, a lot of information.
And again, this is not the, you know, like Jeremy said, this isn't the first time we've opened this up. It started as an expansion went to a modernization, and now it's we have support from a committee of the public for a new facility. So those are three different things, and we've settled on one that I think makes the most sense. But I can't stress enough how important the city's support is.
Right.
So, that being said, I mean, this was on today as an information item. Next week, where we're looking to bring it back. So, this should be on the agenda again next week. Larry, did you have more to say there, or?
Larry brought some information and some recent plans that he's actually done on his own to, I did speak earlier and all along actually with Larry as updates came along. I told him that our expansion committee and others were interested in possibly trying to formulate a joint city-county venture of some sort. Larry's actually done some pre-designed plans for us again that dropped in some spaces in a new facility. And he's also brought his work package of services where he would actually do the actual work for the county and get paid for some of the things that he's done. And so Larry, if you'd please come up and speak to that.
Thank you. Why don't you pass? Here's out. Pass these to the supervisor. These are samples. We have had input from Joshua on a pre-designed master plan that seeks to investigate to a much greater degree than some offhanded diagrams what a new facility would look like, what the potential sites would flesh out and have in terms of qualifications and developing more detailed financial. Some of this stuff is stuff you've seen before in one form or another, so I won't belabor it, but it all seeks to do the same thing, and that is this is 4 parts. The first 3 parts are the site, the building, and then the building's performance. We've had preliminary discussions with the sheriff and with Tony Wingert, the jail administrator, as far as preliminary numbers. This would develop it to a much greater degree, certainly from a revenue as well as an expense standpoint, bring it together into a pro forma that would be finalized for the supervisors' use. And then finally, and that's sort of an aggregate, those 3 pieces. And finally, the 4th piece, which Kenny requested that we hold to the side for the Board of Supervisors deliberation, would be to help with the public dissemination, whether it would be Wi-Fi stuff, drawings, just all the kinds of stuff that, gosh, we've done over 100 bond issues. And I will tell you, the last one we did, which was a $21 million one in the middle of Kansas, passed better than 3-1. And it was just exhilarating to see the people really understand the need and come together in that regard. So I look at this in a positive way, not as something that's just out of the question. So that's this, and
But that work package was in your backup material as well.
One of the things that we talked about is an expansion committee, or I guess it's not really, as supervisor unrelated, not really an expansion anymore, committee, but is the need to educate our public, have presentations. I fully trust that they understand the depth and scope of what it is we're talking about, that will greatly help.
Yes, one of our citizens advisory group members, and I don't remember which one it was, we were in one of the meetings and they said that everybody goes about their daily business every day, and really a lot of things they don't know what's going on. For instance, the LEC, the public probably has not been informed on really what we've been looking at and doing in response to the LEC, the Law Enforcement Center's issues and problems. And the general public probably doesn't understand we're having the difficulties that we have. And part of that needs to be expressed, and the public needs to be informed about that.
And I was wondering, is there anybody from the sheriff's office on cue, or the committee that would want to say anything along those lines?
Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, thank you.
Dave Drew, Sheriff, Woodbury County. So, just to bring everybody up to speed, other than Lisa, and Marty was around, but Lisa and myself and former Sheriff Amy, we've been dealing with this for 19 years. We had an overcrowding issue in 2000, 2001. So we came up with Prairie Hill, and we had issues later with that. One is it didn't no longer meet the criteria to hold people out there, and the other was the cost. And so this thing has been bandied around for years, and the public is very aware of the situation. I think the biggest thing that we have going is on Fridays, we have a meeting with the county attorney, sheriff's office, the judges, probation, and county attorney, if I didn't say that already. And we're trying to decide who can get out. And it becomes a public safety issue. The judges aren't comfortable with letting some people out, nor are we. But we are busting at the seams trying to guess who. We have a young sheriff's office, we have a young police department. These guys are out working hard to put people in jail. And some of them have minimuses, and we have to get a hold of the court and say, we're too full. We can't get them in. It's not acceptable. Our community has a standard. And I think the community, the selling point to me is we have to keep our community safe. And right now, I'm not sure we're doing the best job because we don't have any room. It's no fault of anybody here. Kenny, I can tell you when it gets hot for 5 or 6 days, you're not the only guy worried. Because I'm wondering what are we going to do if that system goes down. Kenny has to worry about buying an HVAC system and doing that and doing all those things. I got to worry about where I'm going to find 150 beds. And so what I'm thinking is we have gone over this and over this, 20-some million or spend the full boat and we need to do it right. And to add 55 beds to a building that's still going to cost us $1 million just because of the remitigation system. I think the public just will understand the good work that everybody's trying to do. Here's one factor that I'd love to get out because I think it is always said around that, oh, we're housing people with simple misdemeanor drug charges. Trust me, Sheriff's Office, or most of our guys on patrol, will cite and release. We don't want them in the jail. We don't have room for them. They may get booked in, but they're going to get right out. We don't house people with those kind of things. People that have any issues medical-wise, because we don't have room. We have to bother the judges night and day to have this person signed out so we can make room, because we don't have that facility available. So to me, it's an educational thing. I don't think it's going to be that hard because I think our community has a standard. They want to remain safe. And unfortunately, that costs money. And how do we get people excited to come vote for a tax increase? Well, they have to look at it that, yeah, that's not a facility they're ever going to use, but it's going to be a facility big enough to keep our community safe. And I think, you know, what people like when they move to community is, at least every time I look, and I haven't ever moved, but I look at other places and I think, you want good schools, and I look at the crime rate. I look at that when I go on vacation. And I think the general public looks at that. Is our community safe? And that's a standard that they want. So yeah, it may be a tough sell, I get it. But we have to be willing to try, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to sell it and say, folks, this is where we are. We have no fault of anybody's. You know, 18 years ago, it might have not been the right time financially or whatever. Not saying it is now, but we have no alternative. And that's our issue.
I think the one thing that you said, there's going to be a cost increase either way.
Right.
But this is the only way, as was alluded to earlier, that there's something to offset a potential tax increase where, you know, this would be, I think, more taxpayer friendly to go this way than that. Yeah.
I do too, wholly. So.
And of course, being in sales, right, you know, it's not necessarily you're selling the public on something, we're just giving them the information. And clearly, like, the best choice in this situation
Right.
is to build a new jail, because you're going to spend $5 to $7 million a year transporting people if we don't have a jail.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to bond 20-some million to fix our current jail, or you can bond and build a new jail and get revenue out of it. And I think, you know, if you just look at it on paper, it's the no-brainer. It really is.
And not to include the overtime costs and the personnel it's going to take to transport people. And when you're doing that, then we backfill them because we're short, because you're taking away. I mean, there's just I try not to think about it.
Well, and I probably am one of the people that have complained in my life that, like the court system here, an apology, because you're wondering, why in the heck are these people getting out? These people need to be in jail.
Right.
And the reason these people are getting out is because we don't have room to put them in jail.
Right.
And it is a public safety issue, because some of these people that have gotten out, one of them shot a police officer, you know, one of them went and, you know, partied and broke the, immediately, you know. It's,
Right. And we've had issues, and it's nothing that any of us are comfortable about doing. And so we just, you know, to me, it'd be like throwing dice and hoping. And that's really not a good way to keep our community safe.
It might be a few $100s in property tax, or it's a few $100s in property damage for somebody that should be in jail.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Ultimately, I think after the board considers all the information, and if you were to decide that the best decision is to build a new facility, at least it's incumbent upon the board to provide all the information to the public, and then let the voters make that decision. It will be their decision, but at least you've done your due diligence, and if something were to happen, or if it went to vote and the public decided, no, we don't want to expend that kind of money, at least you've done your due diligence, and then if something happens later on, you've at least done your best to inform the community, and ultimately it was their decision on what to do.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Like I said, I think the board is actually probably pretty unified on the desire and need to build a new jail. I think we're just kind of getting on the same page on where, how many beds. I mean, that's really how much the discussion's been going last year or two, even. Where to put it, how many beds, what, you know, who can we partner with, how can we, you know, build it right, but build it efficiently. And we'll have it on again next week here as an action item. Thank you, everybody that was working on the committee to get this here at this point. Obviously, I'd like to see a referendum come sooner rather than later with really low interest rates right now. We could save millions of dollars a year just in getting a good interest rate. So, like I said, we'll keep moving forward, and thank you all. Moving on to item 10, reports on committee meetings. Start with Jeremy.
Got three quick ones. I mentioned the Siouxland Mental Health and the Rolling Hills transition building.
Oh, okay.
Co-location is going well. Visited Gelita with their college and peptide revolution. It was amazing. I think it's kind of the best kept secret. $700 million company, and their largest facility worldwide is here. And just all the different uses of this hottest ingredient and the impact it's having on health, and basically 500 different uses that are pretty amazing. So that was a good event. And then I attended the TSI steering committee. Several things that I think are going to be of note for the board. The new building is going to be at 101 Pierce Street, so that's going to be included in all their marketing, like Community Service 101, Business Economics 101. And on 10/1, at 1:01 p.m., they're going to have the opening. And then we came up with ideas like the 101st visitor could get $101. So there's all of these. Yeah, September 17th, there's no chamber dinner this year. So that's something we need to think about as a board. There's a chamber meeting featuring Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And so there's one VIP package left. Otherwise, it could be on our own. It will be significantly shorter than years past, because you may know that can be an extended evening. But tickets are available at the box office. And then finally, they did a presentation. When they're trying to market, Nexstar gave a presentation for the good problem that we have of high or low unemployment. They're using a site called livesiouxlandproud.com. It's really targeting those outside of their community rather than running ads and TV in the local area. They be able to have people who may have their factory shut down in Flint or in Ohio that would otherwise look to relocate. So that's livesiouxlandproud.com, something the commission is considering for marketing for those who may consider relocating to our community.
Matthew, Marty, Rocky. I had nothing to report. Department head meeting this morning. A lot of information. You'll get the minutes, I guess. Nothing really stuck out as nothing that the board hasn't been apprised of before, right? It's all stuff we've heard before. Round 2 of citizen concerns. Come on up if you got one.
Not sure. Well, I'm Monty McCoy. I'm from Climbing Hill, and I'm not sure what the process is for submitting a claim. But I tried to send an email out to each one of the board members. Did you all get it? On the damages in Climbing Hill to the Climbing Hill West water system. I enclosed pictures, copy of the invoice to repair.
What did you
I
say?
didn't get anything.
I sent it over the weekend. I also called, left a message about it. What we have is the water main for the West Water Association terminates right in front of the Woodbury County maintenance shed. And we have a blow-off valve there, and it's covered by a manhole cover. And over the several years that system has been installed with the road grader going in and out, and I have no antagonism toward the road maintenance guy. My dad was the foreman, operated that grader for a number of years out of Climbing Hill. But the manhole, as you can see from the pictures, the manhole cover has settled and pushed down. The concrete around it is cracked. There is one up the street in front of the bank for the East Water Well Association, and there's maybe one crack in it. The manhole cover is not settled at all. So I talked to the foreman out of Hornick about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and asked him to approach the county engineer, and basically there was no interest in I don't know if he ever looked at it or not, but he said they weren't interested in helping out with that. So this year, if you look at the last page, you can see the blow-off riser stub up, and it comes up right underneath the cover. There's a gap in there, normally supposed to be a pretty good gap. And you can see there's a little rust spot on top of that PVC. And what would happen is that continues to put downward pressure on that riser. About 6 feet in the ground where the water main is, it's going to snap off. That means we have to excavate 6 feet, big hole, and repair it. And so we went ahead and did the repairs. I had Interstate Mechanical do it. I work for them, and we had some guys available to take care of it. So we presented an invoice there in the amount of about $2,900, a little over that. We put it back with rebar. We used highway concrete. We put rock in there in the manhole in every effort to support that so it wouldn't happen again. And so we're requesting that the county would reimburse us for that. It took a pretty good chunk out of our reserve. We keep a reserve so that we can replace our pump if we ever need to. The pump serves probably 8 residences down there, and those are the people that pay into the reserve. So we're requesting, I don't know if this is the proper procedure, the proper way to go about it, but here I am. If you have any questions, fire away.
That's something I definitely will probably want the engineer to look at and see if that's something he'd come with out of his budget if he thinks he's part to blame. Looking at the site, it looks like a lower lying spot. There's a big crack. I mean, it could have been water intrusion. It should have been designed to hold the weight that was taking it. So, I mean, I'm not going to accept blame as the county, but I'm not going to say that I'm not willing to necessarily help you out either if it's a big portion of the cost of this. So I think Mark has to look at it and make his determination as an engineer, and we would take his recommendation as a board. That's just me speaking as the chair, but the board can decide whatever too.
Well, the location of it and the installation of it was done by the state. Underground Storage funded it, and the DNR supervised the installation of it. So we really didn't have any say about it. I did come before the County Board of Supervisors, and they were all different faces than what are here today, and asked several years ago for assistance in resolving our problem in Climbing Hill. There were people that wanted to do rural water. It was suggested. I brought a whole row of elderly ladies with me to talk to the board about it, and the board simply replied that we didn't have the funds to do it. I think it's clear what caused this. I can't debate the design, but, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but whenever I come back and say I don't have the money for that, if it's my responsibility, that really doesn't matter. Whether or not I have the money, I have to figure out a way to pay for it, and we'll do installment payments too.
I'm just saying, looking at pictures, I can't sit here and say this is our fault or we caused it,
Right. Well, we'd appreciate your consideration, and we're hoping that you'll help us out with it.
It appears you got us all when you said, I don't know what the proper procedure for this is, because I'm going, I don't know.
Well, we can't act today. It
Right.
needs to be noticed.
And I don't know how you generally deal with these, so that's why I came. Might check into your email systems.
Yeah, I didn't
I did not get one. I
Because
just looked.
you're all listed on the website, and you all have an email address, and it was sent to every one of them, and I got nothing back that said
What's your
it was undeliverable. My email is in Climbing Hill, my private one is lhc@weatel.net.
Is that what it was sent from?
Yes.
I know a lot of times my citizen emails go right into my spam, but I always check those because I know that now.
I check the spam too.
I do too, because several people that send me emails frequently, and I always check them, not spam, and the next one goes right back in there anyway.
You said LHC@wyatl.net?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sending you an email now. Yeah, I don't think any of us got it, and so otherwise, you know.
Well, you could
typically-
fight over that. I wanted to bring more copies, but I ran out of time today. I just brought the one with me in
Well,
case
if
you
you
hadn't
respond
seen
to
it.
mine, I can forward it on for information.
Okay, I'll do it tonight. Appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Mark would know the address if we gave that information to him and everything.
Yeah, it's right.
Right in
I'm at
front of-
48 Deer Run Trail, and it's right across the street from me,
Okay,
county shed.
okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any concerns from the press? Okay. Move on to board concerns. Jeremy, Matthew, Marty, Rocky?
Nope.
And I have none. We are adjourned.